Good evening. Welcome to another edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show. My name is Leon Jones, and tonight I'm going to talk about political ideologies. But one definition that I want to give you tonight is the definition of democracy. And the reason why it's important that you understand what a democracy is because you hear the term used out of context by both the Democrats and Republicans. Next week, I'm going to do a feature on a democracy versus a republic. Now, the United States is not a democracy. Now, we may have some democracy elements, such as being a representative government where the majority of the voters who vote for a candidate, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, will the candidate with the majority votes wins that office. That's where I could say it's a democracy, but a real democracy is where the majority rule. And the reason why we have a constitutional republic is so we won't allow states such as California and New York to run our government. Now, why am I saying this? Because New York and California are your largest states. And unfortunately, New York and California are the states that are the most liberal. I mean, you see this knucklehead who won the Democratic primary. He's only been in the United States for 5 years, and he wants to give New York everything free. In other words, this individual is a flaming communist and socialist. And you New Yorkers, you're more stupid than I thought. You already voted for AOC, and I can understand she looks a little bit better than a Chucky Schumer, but she's dumber than a box of rocks. And this other knucklehead, this Islamic guy, 33 years old, he doesn't know anything about the United States. In fact, you have a number of these foreigners coming over here representing their country, representing their symbols on our soil, but they hate this country. Now, if you hate this country, go back to where you came from. We're going to keep beating that over your head until the cows come home. The bottom line is you have a lot of these individuals voting for Democrats. And you know, the Democrats, again, to me, they're the power of women. And shout out to Machismo TV, The Contractor, Salty Balls, Tito the Truth, and of course, Mr. O with the info. Check out their channels. In fact, I believe Machismo will be broadcasting tonight. Get over there and support those channels because those guys are putting it together when it comes to black male content. And we need some individuals in this sector who understand what's going on. I mean, we know the women, for the most part, are screwed up. You know, they're running around, people like Ebony K. Williams. I mean, I saw that fantastic had on where these women talk about leadership. Well, these women don't, and particularly they're black women. And I hate to say this, feminism has really, what the majority of black women warped their mind. This is why they're not dateable. And I'm talking about the black women who are Generation X and younger. And most of them are from the city and suburbs. And they're trying to be the man. and they don't even understand what a man is. But I tell you what, if we beat their asses, they would understand what a real man is. Give them a black eye or something like that, bloody him up a little bit. Then they would understand what a man is. And this is the problem with a number of women when you give them power. They abuse it. They don't know how to handle power. And a number of them believe that because they have a career and money, they don't have to listen to a man. I saw another video where a black woman last night said, I don't have to listen to a man. Well, who's paying you? Most of these Fortune 500 companies are run by men. Most of the managers are men. Yeah, a number of you women are delusional. You're going to get yourself in very, very big trouble. Particularly a number of you sisters out there. Now, I don't dislike all sisters. I dislike feminists. That's what my gripe is against. I mean, men have built this country, and a number of women think that they're so powerful because they're comfortable. Women don't do anything but destroy everything that they get their hands on. This is why I won't vote Democrat, because when you vote for Democrat, you're voting feminist, you're voting for the alphabet community, you're voting for losers, you're voting for individuals who have this moralistic attitude that they are greater than we are. Now, this all ties into democracies because unfortunately, these are the people who vote. But let me get back on track. When we deal with a democracy, it is the majority. Simple as that. Now, the Electoral College, again, that's the Electoral College, when it comes to voting for president, it cuts down that because every state gets representation. This is why some Democrats, particularly Al Gore and Hillary Clinton, they were upset and they know you need 270 or more electoral college votes to become president. Or they were upset that they won the popular vote but lost the electoral college. Well, the popular vote, if we had gone through the popular vote through this electoral style of government or representative style of government, the Democrats would win because of California and New York. So let me share my screen and let's talk about getting into a democracy. Well, when we deal with a democracy, we deal with the political ideology that's power that's originating and from, and it is ultimately accountable to the people. Now, the system emphasizes citizen participation. Again, that's the system emphasizes citizen participation, not precipitation. It's participation. So again, in a democratic political ideology, power originates from and is ultimately accountable to the people. This system emphasizes citizen participation, free and fair elections, and the protection of individual rights and freedoms. Democracies operate under the principle of popular sovereignty, where the people are the source of government authority. Now, here are some key elements of a democracy: popular sovereignty, free and fair elections, individual rights and freedoms, rule of law, separation of powers, citizen participation. Now, examples of democracies are a parliamentary democracy, a constitutional democracy, a direct democracy, and a representative democracy. But I'm going to get into those a little later on because what I really want to talk about tonight, I just wanted to bring up what a democracy is, but I'm going to talk about a democracy versus a republic next week because all I'm going to do this week, I'm going to make sure I don't have a lengthy video. I just want to teach this week because I want to keep people informed because they don't really understand democracy and political ideologies. And what's happening is you have a number of individuals who are regurgitating everything they see on TV. Now, I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to talk about what a definition of a political ideology is, because tonight we're talking about political ideologies. Now, a political ideology is a set of beliefs, ideas, and values that outline how society should be organized and governed. And it provides a framework for understanding the world and offers a vision for the ideal social order, including how power should be distributed and used. Political ideology, or we can say political ideologies, address a range of societal aspects such as the economy, government, social issues, and more. Now, if you've been watching my videos, I broke down the different types of ideologies. Now, here's a more inclusive, we could say deeper background. So, under political ideologies, starts off with core beliefs. So basically, political ideologies are built on the fundamental beliefs about human race, the role of government, and the ideal social structure. That's again, political ideologies are built on fundamental beliefs about human nature, the role of government, and the ideal social structure. Then we have the social and political blueprint, and they offer a vision for a desired society and provide a roadmap for achieving it, including specific policies and actions. Then we have diverse aspects. Ideologies encompass various facets of society, including the economy, government, social issues, culture, and more. Goals and methods. Political ideologies typically have both goals, what they want to achieve, and methods, how they propose to achieve those goals. Examples. Common examples include liberalism, conservatism, socialism, communism, and fascism. And influence. Ideologies can influence individual political beliefs, shape social movements, and impact government policies and actions. So that's a breakdown of what political ideologies are. Now, let me get into my PowerPoint, and we're going to go forth with some ideologies. So I'm not going to be too long on this video, but I want you to soak up all the information so you can be better informed, because you have too many ignoramuses out here who are listening to MSNBC, CNN for all their information, and they're putting out a bunch of baloney. So we're going to talk about ideology. Now, the role of ideas in politics, what people think and believe about society, power, rights, etc., determines their actions. Everything has to pass through the mind of the individual before he or she acts. So, how do the ideas and beliefs appear in our minds? Well, critical examination of reality, thinking for oneself, influence of others' opinions, family education, mass media. Some forms of teaching imprison the mind. Others liberate the mind, enable it by enabling it to think critically. Again, others, and we're talking about ideologies, basically liberate the mind so it will enable critical thinking. So you have subjugation by force. That's the crudest form of social control. Mind control is a much more effective method, but is it really effective? Well, when you have a lot of dummies here in America, it is effective, because you have the liberals who want you to believe everything that they tell you. But when it comes to the other side, the liberals want to erase the other side. Now, two main concepts about the role of ideas in politics: political culture. It's the broad pattern of political orientations shared by a large group of people, a nation, a region, a class, an ethnic group. Again, political culture is the broad pattern of political orientation shared by a large group of people, which could be a nation, a region, a class, and an ethnic group. That's an ethnic group. And you also have political ideology. It's a system of political ideas developed for the purposes of political action. In governing a country, launching a social movement or political party, organizing a revolution or a counter revolution. Now, what are political ideologies for? Well, to basically, political ideologies are to provide people with programs of political action to govern societies or struggle for change. Again, political ideologies, they're supposed to provide people with programs of political action, which includes governing societies and struggling for change. Both for integration and for conflict, you need an ideology, a coherent set of ideas for purposeful action. That's a set of ideas for purposeful action. Now, the earliest ideologies were religions. Many of the earliest rulers in history were priests. In a modern age, political ideologies become increasingly secular, which means non religious or some anti religious. But religions continue to serve as important sources for ideologies to this day. Examples: you have Christian democracy, Christian socialism, Protestant fundamentalism, and Islamic radicalism. In the very essence of political ideology, to differ from another ideology on what to do with the status quo, the existing order of things, to keep it or to change it. Now, at the core of every political idea, every political action is a choice between yes and no. Look at the work of the parliament or the UN or an election. Now, the differences between ideologies are rooted in basic assumptions about human nature. Are humans naturally peaceful, rational, cooperative? Then you have the individual and society, which individuals or which interests come first. When it comes to individual and society, which interests come first. Then equality. This is where you have a slippery slope. Well, how much social inequality is acceptable? Ideology versus pragmatism. Does too much ideology make you narrow minded? It could. Example: the Democrats. Democrats don't want to hear any other ideas but their own ideas. Now, should one's political beliefs be based on one ideology or be doctrinaire? Shouldn't politicians be free to borrow ideas from different ideologies if they work better in a particular situation? At issue: orthodoxy versus pluralism. Orthodoxy, traditionalist, pre-modern view. The ruler shall maintain one ideology as dominant to foster unity and harmony in society, which means generally traditionalists have a little bit of structure, and their unity is under a structure. Unity through uniformity, laws. That's what they're talking about. Now, can work only in traditional pre-modern societies or in societies in transition to modernity. Now, in periods of extreme crisis, requires generally low education levels. Pluralism, modern view associated with liberalism. The rulers allow different ideologies in society to compete. Unity through toleration of differences, known as, this is Latin, e pluribus unum. Now, works better in developed, modern, and postmodern complex societies with high education levels? Are the limits to toleration? Should some ideologies be banned? Is there such thing as a liberal orthodoxy? Now, the challenge of liberal democratic politics to accept ideological pluralism as a normal condition of society and try to maintain social unity through toleration of differences and management of conflict. It is not always possible. Some ideologies can coexist with each other. Others are so strongly opposed to each other that they cannot be reconciled by any means of compromise, or can they? Political spectrum from left to right. Political ideologies through opposition, competition, fusing, mixing exist in constant interaction with each other. Together, they form a political spectrum. It is a useful tool of political analysis. Now, in theory, it is. At least three. You have far left, center left, center, center right, and far left. And when we talk about at least three, this is where most of your people with common sense are. See, if you go too far to the left, you go with an authoritarian government or an anarchy. And if you go too far right, you go with fascism or national socialism. So guess what? The far left and the far right are actually the same, but they're on opposite sides of the same coin. And this is what we have in partisan politics today. We have a lot of extremists on the left and a lot of extremists on the right. But most of us fall right in the center. Why? Because reality actually looks at different ideologies. The ideologies that don't make sense, we don't normalize it. But for the most part, when you want to have a conversation, this is where you want to be. Now, political spectrum, the standard linear model. Again, once you see this video, you can look at yourself and find out where you are. Again, we're going to draw a line, far left, center, center right, far right. So you look at this chart right here. You look at your far left. You have your socialist. If you really look at everything, your radicals. Look at your radicals and your reactionaries. That's where you start first. Now, if you look at your radicals are either going to go way left and go to communism. And now we're talking about the far left now. If you think about this, we are on the far left. So if you go way left, you're communist. But if you go middle far left, you're a socialist. And if you go far left right, you become a liberal. But now, when you go to the center, you're what we call a liberal conservative. Now, think about this. What is a liberal conservative? We can look at that as more of a libertarian type, because if you look at the far right, you've got your reactionaries. And if you go far right, you got your fascists. If you go far center right, you got your ultra conservatives. But you see, fascism also connects to ultra conservatism. But if you go from your reactionary to your conservatives, then you go right to the center. So now you're coming to the far right. The far right is your ultra conservatives. But your left far right, or if you really look at this chart, your big guns up here are your socialists, liberal conservatives, and your ultra conservatives. And then you really get down to make it really easy. You have your communists and your liberals. Then you have your conservatives and your fascists. And you have your radicals and your reactionaries. That is the political spectrum. That is the model. And if you understand that model, you can understand where all these ideologies come from. The ideologies come from people who come here from other countries. Now, you have individuals, for the most part, in college. They come from other countries, but they're still teaching this. You have your people who are your patriots. They're teaching this. But what about here? This is where a number of your independents are, right in here. Actually, these are the people here with the most sense. But if you, again, you look at this chart, this is very important. Look at where you start. You start as a radical and a reactionary. You can think about that. Radical and reactionary. They're on opposite sides of the same coin. And it's funny because your radicals, they go way left to be communists. And your reactionaries go way right to be fascists. Again, then your radical can go what we call to the center far left to become a socialist. And your reactionary can go center far right to become an ultra conservative. Then your radical could go right far left and become a liberal. And your reactionary can go left far right, become a conservative. You see how all this is meshing? Because really, the ultimate goal here is you can go to the right when you're from the left to the center, and you can go to the left from the right to the center and become a liberal conservative. And that's where libertarians come from. And that's what you see in this chart. But the problem is we have these guys right here, and right here in power. Where the problem is. It's why nothing's getting solved. Now, ideas associated with different fields of the political spectrum. The right, conservatism, preserve the status quo. Oppose change. Reaction, to throw back the forces of change, restore the old order. Fascism, mobilize the nation for war, suppress pluralism to achieve unity through orthodoxy. The left, radicalism, go to the roots of the problems, change the foundations of society. Socialism, advance the interest of society against the interest of elites. Communism, abolish private property to achieve equality and social harmony, suppress pluralism to achieve unity through orthodoxy. Now, remember what I just said before? How you can be on the opposite side of the same coin and still get to the same destination. Now, fascism and communism do just that. The only difference is fascism mobilized nations for war. Communism, you would abolish private property. But what's common about fascism and communism is both of them suppress pluralism to achieve unity through orthodoxy. So what does that really mean? They have different ways of associating the ideology to meet in the middle to achieve unity through orthodoxy. Now, when you get to the center, it's where you have liberalism. Liberalism expands the scope of freedom. Because remember, what we call real liberalism on the Democratic side, that's not liberalism, that's progressivism. That's more or less going into radicalism, some socialism, and communism. But real liberalism expands the scope of freedom, accepts change, asserts the primacy of individual rights, develop market economy, and political pluralism. Now, how does the center work? Because the center borrows ideas from the left and the right. However, they do not borrow anything extreme. Why? I'm going to tell you why. Because they want to develop pluralism. They don't use a means of force or means of taking something, because basically, when you are a fascist or a communist, what are you doing? You're really taking something by force to achieve that unity through orthodoxy. But liberalism, talking about rights, freedom, accepting change, market economies. That's why when we talk about liberalism, talk about classic liberalism. And that's why the center is where you really want to be, because the center makes most sense, being from the center. So there are several dimensions here: change or preservation of the status quo, freedom or order, pluralism or orthodoxy, equality or inequality, market or state, all basically opposite sides of the same coin. Ideas interact, travel across the spectrum, too many possible combinations. How can all these complexities be taken into account? Well, let's look at this model here. Political spectrum, a two-dimensional model. So now you have the market and the state. Now, what do I mean by the market? Well, the market is the free market, and the state is the welfare state. The state is regulated. So how do you form a state? Confiscation and war. Now, when it comes to the markets, you have, look at the market right here on the left. Now, this is how you find out the difference. Most of the people on the left want welfare state liberalism. That's really what they want here. They want a welfare state where we redistribute wealth to everybody. And this is where you talk about the democracy right here: social democracy and market socialism. That's where you get the term democracy. So when you hear the left talk about democracy, they want social democracy, where they want to employ a welfare state. Now, you see over here on the right, free market. So they want the market to dictate everything. It's called market authoritarianism, where the market dictates everything. This is where you have to compete. There's no redistribution of wealth. And then you have more freedom to own. This is neoliberalism. And when you go far left, this is when you get more in, you get into government, authoritarian governments. It's called state socialism. What's another name for state socialism? Communism. So you have two types of socialism. What the Democrats want, they want a welfare state, but their market is socialism, government programs. And this is where they use the term democracy. And then the right, traditional conservatism, but they also want fascism. And they want to use fascism to keep everything traditional. That's fascism. But if you look at the markets on the left and the right, you can tell the difference. This is right here. It's pointed out. You may use three or more dimensions. Well, if you look at this dimension right here, you look at the market and you look at the state, free market and the state. Well, Looking over here, if you understand data on how to read everything, here on the left, they want a democracy. But under democracy, anytime you hear equality, that's when you know of what we call democracy, welfare state, state socialism, communism. They want government to make everything equal. They want government's use, welfare state. So inequality, again, we talk about neoconservatism. We talk about traditional conservatism, authoritarianism. This is when you go to the right, where the right wants to uphold all of the traditional values. And this is where you're going to have a lot of your inequalities. Again, this is your capitalism. This is where you have to compete. See, for equality, you don't have to compete because everything is distributed. This is where you get what we call your welfare state right here. Right here, this is where you get your free market. That's how this diagram works. Political spectrum also uses the circular model based on Clinton Rossiter. Again, the market, trade, the state, war. And you look at what's added to the circle: liberalism, the left, change, freedom, equality, and labor. Now, when we talk about labor, who was the one that mentioned labor as part of their socialist or his socialism? Karl Marx mentioned labor. So, under liberalism, the left, you have your change, freedom, equality, and labor, and then you have your communism and then the state. Again, the free market, trade, and the conservatism. You have the right, status quo, order, inequality, and capital. And you look, all of these are opposite of one another. Then you have the state, and then you have war. That's fascism. Then the war is to keep everything the way it is. That's where people are conservative. Liberalism is when we start dealing with everything over, particularly the economy, where you have the workers. Now, in the middle, I guarantee you'll have a little bit of everything. But I guarantee you can make it work too with the right people. There are several different ways to cut into this pie graph. All right, red, socialism. Again, welfare, state liberalism. So you have your neoliberalism and you have your state liberalism, social democracy, democratic socialism, reform communism, market socialism. Then you have your totalitarian communism. And then on the right, neoliberalism, neoconservatism, traditional conservatism, ultra conservatism. And the only one in the red here is National Socialism, which is fascism. So you can see how this chart works when you have socialism versus communism. And if you really look at everything in red, this is why socialism is a disaster. But if you look at everything over here, with the exception of fascism, this is where most of us want to be. Why? Because we can own everything. The government is not intrusive. We're not looking for the state to give us everything. You have to compete. People over here don't want to compete. All right, then you have your red, your populist, your white, your elitist, you discourage popular participation in politics. You're red, you're populist, you mobilize the masses. And this is where you're getting all these protests, because you have a lot of the little guys thinking that they're going after this administration for what we voted for. See, over here, this area won the election, but this area who lost the election is still trying to invoke their views over here by using protest and other scare tactics, fear mongering from the media. But you want to know what? You want to know what's really different about this chart, though, however? A lot of your elitists are over here on the red. People like Bill Gates, George Soros, they have the money. They want to change society. So basically, over here, if you really look at it, you got the rulers versus the peasants. And if you think about it over here, they will tell you about equality, but they will use confiscation and even other types of fear mongering and violence as well to control the masses from participating. These are the guys over here who are talking about decreasing the population. Over here, people like Margaret Sanger. Look at this chart, you're going to get an understanding of what we see in politics today. Again, reject liberal democracy. Well, support liberal democracy. Well, now, if you look at it, even over here, neoconservatism, neoliberalism, for and against liberal democracy. And for the most part, everything is basically overlapping. Now, for the most part, most people don't know what a democracy is. That's why I gave you the definition. Democracy, reason why these individuals don't want it is because you have a lot more people who are representing ideas. But you look at it, look at communism. They reject liberal democracy. So, see, now your individuals on the left need to understand this. Look at reform communism. They reject it. So some of you individuals on the left, you talk about democracy. You get the communism. Communism does not support democracy. Why? Because the government rules everything. No private property. And fascism. So basically, if you think about it, National Socialism and communism are basically the same thing, but they go different ways about achieving their objective. Three major factors which produce, shape, and reshape ideology: time, class, and crisis. Democrats are good for creating a crisis. That's what the fear mongering does. And if you are not knowingly of what's going on, you're going to think a crisis is happening. And you're not going to hear the other side. And that's where we get into communism and fascism. Both sides don't hear each other because they think they're right. Time, the flow of time, the course of history, social evolution and development, the 5 centuries of modernization, the issue of change, social, technical, cultural, economic, also age, individuals, countries, systems, and readiness to embrace change. The influence of liberalism today is particularly explained by the fact that liberalism was created as the ideology of change. Conservatism's main problem is how to keep order in a changing world. Class. Each major ideology has its main roots in the interest of a certain class or a section of a class or several aligned classes. For instance, in 19th century Europe, conservative ideologies were rooted in the interest of landed aristocracy and clergy, classes losing power as a result of modernization. When we talk about clergy, what do we mean? Religion. It's another ideology that I've mentioned, and religion is also used to control the masses. Now, liberalism was rooted in the interest of the rising bourgeoisie. Socialism was rooted in the interest of the working classes. So the special role of the intellectuals in the production of ideas. This is why you get up here when you hear the liberals, they believe that they're smarter than everybody else because they have all the education. They believe that they speak well. They believe that they're the advocates of change, and they want to police everybody because they believe that their morals are much better. And when it comes to the working classes on the left, they can't stand capitalism because there's no redistribution of wealth. The economics doesn't trickle down. And these are the individuals who don't compete or they can't compete because they don't have enough education or enough skill. So basically, both of these contradict each other. A crisis, catastrophe, major war, economic collapse, ecological disaster or famine, major deterioration of social conditions, breakdown of the state, a revolution, or a counter revolution. Crisis creates powerful demand for new ideas, and people commit themselves to ideas much more strongly, become more ideological than in the normal times. Liberalism, conservatism, socialism, and fascism have offered comprehensive political worldviews. Other important ideologies which have not developed into comprehensive systems of thought, but have had major influence on national and global politics. Nationalism, creating independent states, fostering national unity. Anarchism, rejection of the state as a social mechanism. Feminism, which is an evil. They call it a struggle for gender equality, but it's another Marxist program. Why? Because it's really what it's doing. It's giving women all these artificial rights to where they are a protective class. And that's why a number of women are very, very disrespectful because of the laws here in the West. It allows women greater power. And you have environmentalism, saving the planet. What about religious fundamentalisms? And lastly, you can explore the Canadian political spectrum, liberals, conservatives. And again, I will say this gives you some insight, but I want to tell you about Canada. Canada is, for the most part, a socialist country. But I chose this PowerPoint because, for the most part, they have the same issues as the United States, but the United States is not quite a socialist country. In other words, there's no socialized healthcare. I know a number of people want socialized healthcare here, but for the most part, how do we know if it's going to work or not? We don't know. But we know the Democrats have given it to all the migrants. So for the most part, to be better informed, you need to understand the ideologies. So what I have done was pointed out why everybody believes what they believe, particularly in the mainstream media and politically. I showed you how to interpret the graphs. Because basically, what we are going through today is welfare state versus free market. Over here, they want the equality. Over here, they want the inequality. The bottom line, I'm just going to say this. Where do you stand? Where's your mind? Do you want a lot of government intervention, or do you want to be able to make your own decisions? Do you want no private ownership, or do you want private ownership? In the end, it all equals this. Do you want a welfare state, or do you want free market? Do you want authoritarianism, or you want freedom? Do you want to be ruled by Washington, D.C. here, or do you want to be an individual? So to sum everything up, do you want to be imprisoned by the government, or do you want to have your own mind using critical thinking to be free? So what we have is freedom versus authoritarianism. Where do you sit in a political spectrum? Put it in the comment section. Because in the end, I want to be able to use my own mind. I don't want the government taking all of my money away to give to people who are able bodied. I work hard for my money. I don't want a totalitarian type of government. In other words, do you want freedom? Do you want to be on the plantation? Because once you step into that hole of the government ruling, it's going to be very hard to change it back. And that's what people don't understand. And you have people here in this country who really want a totalitarianism style government, but they don't understand what it is. It's because these are the people who are losers in life. They can't compete. They don't want to compete. They have every excuse not to compete. This is why you hear the terms that individuals who have money are greedy. Yeah, you do have some that are greedy, but you know, the ones who are on the left are also greedy because in communism, you get the trinkets. The government gets most of the resources. In fact, they dictate where the resources will be distributed. And for the most part, the people who think they're getting equality are not getting equality. You know, you hear the terms like feminism. Women actually, they've been given everything by a man and they don't appreciate it. And they think they can go out with this artificial power and disrespect men. Men wanted to, they could take your rights away today because men still run this country, ladies. Okay, how many of you sit on these panels and say you're not going to listen to men? Once they take away your resources, then you got nowhere to run because you're not going to do it by yourself because many of you ladies are selfish. You talk about trying to be a man. Many of you don't even understand what it is to be a man. You try to mimic a man with your masculinity, but it's all fake. Because if you really want masculinity, fight a man in a ring. See where you end up. See, a lot of you ladies want control, particularly, i.e., you liberal black women. That's why they talk all this shit out here. But that's all they're doing, selling wolf tickets. They get out here and run their mouths all day, talking about how much money they make. They still don't make the amount of money that men make. Bottom line, I respect that they have the freedom of speech. But see, people on the left don't want freedom of speech. So I'm going to ask this one question. You want freedom? Or do you want to be controlled by the government? In the end, it'll be the choice. For my choice, I want to be able to think for myself, build for myself, and get through society based on my own merit. And if you had any sense, you would also think that way as well. Why? Because people who think for themselves, for the most part, are better producers. People who don't, they're just sheep. They're just being controlled. In the end, use your own mind and be free. And that's my commentary for this edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube. If you like what I just presented, please comment, share, and subscribe. And if you are looking for some STEM content, check out my second channel, the QCIS channel. On that channel, I give you a daily dose of science, technology, engineering, and math. Now, here's where you can find me. For 411 Talk Zone radio show, you can find me right here on YouTube. You can also find me on X, formerly Twitter, Rumble, and True Social. And for the QCIS channel, you can find me right here on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, and you can also find me on LinkedIn. In the end, always be blessed with what you have. Don't worry about what you don't have. But if the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and if it doesn't apply, just let it fly. But if the shoe fits, wear it. And if you don't like the shoe, just change it. Once again, thank you for listening to this edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube. Till next time, my name is Leon Jones. I want you all to have a wonderful and gracious evening. God bless you. I'm out.